History remembers kings and conquerors, but it often forgets the women who survived the storm. This story was buried in time, ignored by power, and silenced by fear. Until now. She was not born into power. No cameras waited for her. No history books spoke her name. She was just a girl in a quiet American town, where dreams were small, and expectations for women were even smaller. Her mornings began before the sun. The sound of an old clock, the smell of worn wood, the silence of a house that carried more worries than words. She learned early that survival does not announce itself. It whispers. It waits. It watches. Her mother taught her strength without saying the word. Hands rough from work. Eyes tired yet determined. A woman who never complained, because complaining never changed anything. She watched her father leave every morning, returning late, carrying exhaustion instead of hope. And in those moments, she understood something most children never do. Life does not offer fairness, only choices. School was not a place of dreams for her. It was a reminder of distance between what she was and what others were allowed to become. She was intelligent, but invisible, curious, but unheard. Teachers praised louder students. Boys were encouraged to lead. Girls like her were told to be realistic. But inside her, something refused to stay quiet. At night, when the town slept, she imagined another life. Not rich, not famous, just free. She did not know what freedom looked like yet, but she knew what it felt like. A deep calm, a quiet certainty that her life would not end where it began. She worked after school. Small jobs, long hours, saving coins that felt heavier than gold. People around her saw nothing special. Just another girl. Just another worker. Just another story that would never matter. But unnoticed lives often carry the strongest fires. She listened more than she spoke. Observed patterns. Learned how people moved. How decisions were made. Who held power. And who served it. She learned that real power was not loud. It was consistent. Quiet. Patient. While others chased attention, she chased understanding. She learned to read people. To anticipate reactions. To adapt without losing herself. Mistakes came early. Failures came often. But she never let them define her. Every setback became a lesson. Every disappointment became direction. She was underestimated. And she allowed it. Because underestimated people move freely. No one watched her closely. No one feared her ambition. No one imagined what she was becoming. And that was her advantage. She carried rejection like armor, silence like strategy, and patience like a weapon. She learned that survival is the first empire. And she built it carefully, slowly, quietly, deliberately. She did not announce her dreams. She protected them. Because dreams spoken too early are often killed by doubt. She waited, not because she was afraid, but because she was preparing. And in that preparation, a foundation was forming, stronger than anyone could see. This was not the beginning of success. This was the beginning of strength. And strength, once built, cannot be undone. As the years passed, the world around her stayed small, but her awareness grew larger. She realized early that effort alone was never enough. That hard work without direction only led to exhaustion. People around her worked endlessly, yet remained in the same place. And she asked a question most were afraid to ask. Why? She began to study outcomes, not just actions. She watched who advanced, who stayed behind, and who quietly controlled the room. She noticed patterns. Confidence mattered more than talent. Connections mattered more than effort. Timing mattered more than intention. And instead of resenting this truth, she accepted it. Because truth, even when uncomfortable, is power. She worked jobs that taught her humility. Cleaning, serving, organizing, listening. Every role became a classroom. Every task became training. She learned how systems worked, how decisions were made, how resources moved, and how silence could be more powerful than noise. She observed leadership closely. What worked, what failed, what created loyalty, and what destroyed it. She learned that respect was not demanded. It was built. Slowly. Consistently. She watched men speak with certainty, even when they were unsure. And women hesitate, even when they were right. And she decided. She would never ask permission. To believe in herself. She practiced speaking. Alone at first. Then in small moments. Until her voice no longer trembled. Failure followed her often. Applications rejected. Ideas ignored. Opportunities denied. But each rejection refined her. She learned patience. Not the kind that waits, but the kind that prepares. She saved money carefully. Not for luxury, but for options. Options were freedom. And freedom was her goal. She resisted the pressure to settle. To marry security. To trade ambition for comfort. Because comfort without purpose felt like another kind of prison. She saw women around her disappear into expectations. Their dreams folded away. Their potential never tested. And she promised herself that would not be her story. Loneliness became familiar. But she accepted it. Because growth often happens in isolation. She learned to trust herself. To rely on her instincts. To move quietly toward her goals. Mistakes still came. Fear still whispered. But determination spoke louder. She stopped explaining herself. Stopped seeking validation. Stopped waiting to be chosen. She chose herself. And in that decision, something shifted. She was no longer surviving. She was preparing. The world had not noticed yet. But momentum was building. Beneath the surface. Where the strongest foundations are formed. And without realizing it, she was stepping closer to a life that would one day change everything. Her first real opportunity did not arrive like a miracle. It came quietly, almost unnoticed. A small role, a modest responsibility, something others overlooked. But she saw possibility where others saw limitation. She accepted without hesitation, knowing that beginnings rarely look like breakthroughs. The work was demanding, the recognition minimal, the expectations unclear. Yet she committed fully, arriving early, leaving late, learning everything. She paid attention to details, the kind most people ignored. How decisions were influenced, how trust was earned, how value was demonstrated. Mistakes were made, and she owned them, without excuses, without defensiveness. That alone set her apart. People began to rely on her, not because she demanded it, but because she delivered. Consistency became her reputation. Quiet excellence became her signature. She listened carefully, asked thoughtful questions, and offered solutions instead of complaints. While others sought attention, she focused on impact. And slowly, people noticed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. She was invited into conversations, trusted with responsibilities, included in decisions. It was not promotion. It was positioning. She learned that real advancement often happens before titles change. She faced moments of doubt, wondering if her efforts mattered, if her patience would be rewarded. But she continued, because purpose had replaced fear. She invested in skills, communication, strategy, negotiation. Knowledge became her leverage. She learned how to navigate power without becoming consumed by it, how to influence without dominating. Others still underestimated her, and she allowed it, because underestimated people are given room to move freely. Her work began to create results, measurable, undeniable, and with results came resistance. Some felt threatened. Others dismissed her success as luck. She did not respond. She let her work speak. Pressure increased. Expectations rose. And she adapted. Failure visited again. This time publicly. But instead of retreating, she learned faster. Every setback sharpened her focus. Every challenge strengthened her resolve. She began to understand. This was no longer preparation. This was momentum. She was no longer invisible. But she was not yet powerful. And in that space, between being seen and being underestimated, she found her advantage. Because she knew the most dangerous moment is when people think they understand you, and they did not. Not yet. Success often invites attention, and attention invites conflict. As her influence grew, so did resistance. People who once ignored her now questioned her, not because she was wrong, but because she was rising. Trust was tested, alliances shifted, and she learned a painful truth. Not everyone celebrates your growth. A promise was broken, an agreement quietly changed, credit redirected, and she stood watching as her work benefited others. Betrayal rarely arrives loudly. It arrives disguised as misunderstanding. She felt the weight of disappointment, the sting of injustice, the loneliness of standing alone. When you expected support, for the first time, she questioned herself, not her abilities, but her direction. Nights grew heavier, sleep became restless, and doubt pressed closer. She wondered if she had misjudged people, if she had trusted too easily, if her silence had been mistaken for weakness. Yet even in pain, she observed. She watched how power reacted when challenged by integrity, how insecurity masked itself as authority, how fear created cruelty. She faced a decision: retreat or redefine. Walking away would have been easier, starting over less painful, but growth rarely follows comfort. She chose to stay, not to prove others wrong, but to prove herself right. She adjusted her strategy, strengthened her boundaries, and stopped offering loyalty to those who did not earn it. She learned that professionalism does not require emotional sacrifice. She separated worth from validation and ambition from approval. The loss taught her clarity. The betrayal taught her discernment. She became more selective, more strategic, and more resilient. Pain refined her focus. She stopped explaining herself, stopped absorbing blame, stopped shrinking to preserve harmony, because harmony without respect is submission. She reclaimed her confidence, not loudly, but firmly. And in that moment, something inside her changed. She was no longer seeking opportunity. She was creating it. This was not the end of her rise. This was the moment it became deliberate. And deliberate growth cannot be stopped. The turning point never announced itself. It arrived quietly, disguised as another challenge. Resources were limited, support uncertain, and the path unclear. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer waited for permission. She no longer waited for rescue. She trusted herself. She took a risk, not reckless, but calculated. A decision others avoided, an idea others dismissed, a responsibility others feared. She stepped forward. Failure was a possibility, and she knew it. But stagnation was no longer acceptable. She gathered what she had: experience, relationships, knowledge, and belief. Belief became the difference. She worked longer than before, thought deeper, planned further. She anticipated problems, prepared solutions, and moved with intention. Mistakes still happened, but now, they did not slow her. They redirected her. People noticed a change. Her presence carried certainty. Her words carried clarity. She no longer explained her vision. She demonstrated it. Results followed. Not immediately, but consistently. Trust grew. Opportunities expanded. And influence followed performance. She learned to negotiate, to protect her value, to say no without guilt. Boundaries became strength. Pressure increased. And with it, visibility. Some admired her rise. Others resented it. She remained focused. She invested in others. Mentored quietly. Lifted those who worked, not those who flattered. Loyalty became selective, and leadership intentional. She faced moments of fear, guiet moments, when responsibility felt heavy, but fear no longer controlled her. It informed her. She accepted that leadership meant isolation, and influence meant accountability. She stopped chasing approval and started building impact. This was no longer survival. This was construction. Brick by brick, decision by decision, she was building something that could not be taken from her. And without realizing it, Others had begun to follow. Not because she demanded it, but because she embodied direction. This was the moment. Her path became irreversible. The rise had begun. Power does not always arrive with applause. Sometimes it settles quietly, earned through consistency, and protected through discipline. Her influence expanded, not through dominance, but through trust. People sought her guidance, not because of her title, but because of her judgment. She understood something few did. Authority given can be taken. Authority earned endures. She moved carefully, aware that visibility invites scrutiny. Every decision carried weight. Every mistake carried consequence. Yet she remained steady. She built systems, not dependence. Structures that functioned without her presence. True leadership is measured by what survives in your absence. She delegated wisely, trusted selectively, and corrected privately. She listened more than she spoke. And when she spoke, people listened. Respect followed restraint. Her work began to create stability, opportunities for others, paths that did not exist before. She lifted without announcing it, supported without claiming credit. Her reputation traveled ahead of her. Calm, reliable, effective. She faced resistance from those threatened by change and challenged by accountability. But she did not engage emotionally. She responded strategically. Conflict was handled with clarity, not aggression. She learned to separate ego from outcome and emotion from execution. Growth accelerated, not dramatically, but sustainably. She rejected shortcuts, knowing they collapse under pressure. Integrity became her currency. She refused to compromise it, even when it cost her. And it did, at times. But long-term vision outlives short-term gain. She learned that power without values is fragile, and she was building something meant to last. Her presence began to influence culture, how people treated each other, how decisions were made, how success was defined. She created environments where effort was rewarded and honesty respected. This was not empire in name, but empire in function. And those who understood recognized it. Others would not realize until much later, because the most enduring empires are not built loudly. They are built correctly. By now, many felt her influence, but few understood its source. She never positioned herself at the center. She placed the mission there, and that confused people. They searched for ego, for ambition, for hunger for recognition, but found none. What they found instead was intention. She understood that visibility attracts noise, and noise weakens focus. So she chose discretion. Decisions were made behind closed doors, moves calculated in silence, outcomes revealed only when complete. She learned how narratives are shaped, and how truth is often ignored when it is not dramatic. So she let results speak. Contracts were negotiated quietly, partnerships formed strategically, risks shared carefully. She built influence across rooms. She was never seen entering. People repeated her ideas, thinking they were their own, and she allowed it, because ownership of impact mattered more than credit. She became the mind behind progress, the stabilizing force, the unseen architect. Those who paid attention recognized her presence in the consistency, in the calm during chaos, in the solutions that appeared before problems escalated. She carried responsibility without demanding authority, and that is rare. Pressure followed, high stakes, critical decisions, moments where failure would be visible. She remained composed. Panic was never her language. Clarity was. She built trust in moments of uncertainty by offering direction, not reassurance. She spoke truth, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it cost her favor, because favor fades, but credibility compounds. She faced moments of isolation, when leadership demanded distance, and strength required restraint. But she did not retreat. She understood that loneliness is often the price of vision. People around her grew stronger, more capable, more confident. and she celebrated quietly. This was her empire, not measured by buildings or headlines, but by people empowered, systems stabilized, and futures secured. History rarely records those who work in silence. But silence does not erase impact. It preserves it. And what she was building was approaching a moment when it could no longer remain hidden, because truth eventually surfaces. Always. Time has a way of revealing what silence tries to protect. The world began to notice changes. Markets shifted. Communities stabilized. Decisions carried consistency. People asked questions, not about who, but about how. How did things start working? How did chaos become order? How did instability turn into growth? The answers were never public, but patterns pointed toward her. Still, she remained unnamed. She preferred distance from spotlight because she understood its cost. Attention invites distortion, and distortion threatens purpose. But impact cannot stay hidden forever. Those she had guided rose into visible leadership. Those she had mentored began shaping outcomes. And slowly, her influence echoed through their actions. People began connecting dots, seeing her presence in progress, her discipline in structure, her values in decisions. The truth surfaced quietly, through results, through consistency, through stability that endured pressure. Those who once overlooked her now sought her counsel, some with sincerity, others with calculation. She discerned carefully. Access to her time became rare because her focus was valuable. She was no longer proving anything. She was protecting what she built. She understood that legacy is not announced. It is recognized. She shifted her attention from expansion to endurance, from growth to continuity. She invested in the next generation, not publicly, but intentionally. Knowledge was transferred, responsibility shared, vision preserved. She prepared others to lead without her, because true power does not cling. It prepares successors. The empire now existed, independent of her presence. And that was her greatest achievement. She had built something that could not be dismantled by her absence. Something resilient, rooted, and principled. This was not the end. This was completion. The quiet satisfaction of knowing the work would continue long after she stepped back. And in that stillness, she understood. Impact does not require recognition. It requires intention. The truth did not arrive as a headline. It arrived as understanding. People finally realized that stability does not happen by accident, that progress leaves fingerprints. And those fingerprints pointed back to her. Stories began circulating. Not interviews, not documentaries, but quiet acknowledgments. People who said, "She was the one who guided us, the one who steadied the room, the one who saw further than anyone else." Her name surfaced in conversations, spoken with respect, not curiosity. She did not correct the record, nor did she hide from it. She accepted recognition without attachment, because she had already won. She had built something that worked, that lasted, that mattered. The world often celebrates noise, but relies on silence. And she had mastered silence. Younger women began to find her, seeking direction, not shortcuts. She offered honesty, not comfort. She told them, strength is built slowly, power is protected quietly, and freedom comes from discipline. She warned them, visibility is not value, and attention is not influence. Her words carried weight, because they were lived. She reflected on her journey, not with pride, but with clarity. Every rejection, every betrayal, every lonely decision had served a purpose. Nothing was wasted. She understood now that obscurity had been protection, and patience had been strategy. History would not remember her name loudly, but history would move because of what she built. And that was enough. She stepped further back, allowing others to lead, others to shine, knowing the foundation would hold, because she had tested it under pressure, under loss, under time. This was not disappearance. This was completion. The kind few reach, and fewer understand. She had built more than an empire. She had built a legacy, not one recorded in headlines, but one carried quietly in the actions of others. She understood now that true power does not shout. It shapes. It influences. It endures. The women she mentored, the systems she designed, the decisions she made, all reflected her vision. Her story was not about recognition, not about applause, not about wealth or fame. It was about impact, about lifting others while rising, about creating something that could outlast her. She had learned that success is a byproduct of integrity, discipline, and relentless patience. She had seen the world from the bottom, and she had walked it to the top. Not loudly, not with fanfare, but with quiet determination. Her empire existed, not in buildings, not in titles, not in newspapers, but in lives transformed, in opportunities created, in courage inspired. She looked back at the girl she once was, the one who dreamed quietly, the one who believed secretly, and she smiled, because that girl had been right all along. Strength comes in silence, courage grows in preparation, and empires are built, brick by brick, decision by decision, step by step. And now, she could step forward, knowing her work would continue, even in her absence. She had become unstoppable, not through attention, but through intention. Her story would ripple, through generations, through communities, through lives yet unknown. And that was the ultimate victory, because the world remembers what endures, not what shouts. And she had endured, in silence, in patience, in courage, in strength, in power, in legacy. And in that endurance, she had changed everything.